It was a cold December afternoon when I sat at my old wooden kitchen table in Toronto, sipping coffee and looking out the window at the snow gently falling. The holiday season always brought a mix of emotions. On one hand, I was grateful for the warmth of my home and the roof over my head, but on the other, there was always this quiet emptiness, a feeling that lingered more deeply as the years went by. I had been a father for almost 30 years now, and, like every father, I had done my best to give my children everything they needed, sacrificing my own desires, putting in long hours at work, always working double shifts, doing everything I could to ensure they didn't feel the sting of hardship. I had been a mechanic for most of my life, spending long hours repairing cars in a small auto shop on the outskirts of Toronto. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills, put food on the table, and kept a roof over our heads. It wasn't easy, but like most parents, I'd never considered it a choice. It was just what you did for your kids. That afternoon, the sun was low in the sky, casting a soft glow on the snow outside. My daughter Amanda, who had recently moved into her own home with her husband Brian, came into the kitchen. Her face lit up with excitement. As always, it was rare for her to visit these days, especially with her busy life. The city was pulling her away from me. But I tried not to think about it too much. She was an adult now, after all, with a life of her own. "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm as she kissed me on the cheek. "Merry Christmas early. I've got a little something for you." Her eyes sparkled as she handed me a small, crumpled envelope. I could tell by the way it felt in my hand that it wasn't much a lottery ticket. I smiled, trying to push back the years of exhaustion and disappointment I felt whenever I thought about how much I had given, how little had ever come back. The years of missed moments, of hard work. And yet here I was, receiving a gift so small, so insignificant. "Thanks, Amanda," I said, my voice steady. "What's this?" "It's a lottery ticket, Dad," she said, laughing. "I thought it'd be fun. You never know, right? If you win, I'll take my half." "Of course," she added with a grin, her voice light and carefree. I could feel my chest tighten at her words, but I forced myself to smile. "Very thoughtful," I said, trying to keep the sarcasm from slipping through. She hadn't even noticed. I could feel the frustration building inside of me, but I pushed it down. After all, it was Christmas. Family. You didn't want to make a scene, not over something so small, right? I took the ticket from her, examining it. It was a $5 scratch-off, the kind you bought at the local gas station for a bit of fun. Amanda had always been like that, thoughtless in the best of ways. A smile here, a joke there, and in that moment, the $5 ticket felt like the culmination of everything I had given up in my life. The sacrifices, the long hours in the shop, the missed birthdays and holidays. She handed me a joke, a tiny scrap of paper, and told me, with a straight face, that half of it should be hers if I won. But I kept my face neutral, not letting my frustration show. I placed the ticket on the table, running my fingers along the edge as I tried to steady my thoughts. "I appreciate it, sweetheart," I said, my voice softening as I looked up at her. "Really?" Just then, there was a noise behind me. The sound of Brian, her husband, walking into the room. He looked just as polished and put together as always, his perfectly pressed shirt and slacks reflecting the success that seemed to follow him wherever he went. Brian had always been the kind of guy who didn't worry about money. Everything came easily to him. Hey, David, Brian said, offering a handshake and a smile that always felt a little too rehearsed. Got your present ready too? I glanced at Amanda, who was now grinning like a child on Christmas morning. She was genuinely proud of her gift, excited to present it, and I suppose I should have been happy for her. But instead, I felt that same old bitterness creeping in. Amanda reached behind her and pulled out an elegant gift box, the kind of box that cost more than my monthly rent. It sparkled under the light as she opened it to reveal what could only be described as a luxurious gift. A set of cruise tickets to the Caribbean for two, priced at a whopping $20. Ling, ling, ling. Brian deserves something special, Amanda said, her voice bright, her eyes flickering toward her husband, for all that he's done for us. For me. This is for you. Babe. Brian accepted the tickets, his face lighting up. He pulled the tickets from the box, examining them like they were gold. Now that's what I call a real gift, he said, slipping them back into the box with a satisfied smirk. Thank you, darling. I stood there, my heart sinking. As I watched the two of them, I couldn't help but feel like a fool. The lottery ticket that Amanda had handed me, a simple $5 scrap of paper, now felt so small in comparison to the grand gesture she had given to Brian. They looked so happy, so content in their little bubble, oblivious to how hurtful their actions were. But there I stood, silent. I could feel the sting in my chest, the sense of inadequacy and frustration bubbling up again. This was it. This was the life I had given my children. Years of hard work, of sacrifice, and all I had received in return was a joke of a gift. The ticket, half a joke, half a test, was now a reminder of how I had failed, how I had become invisible in the eyes of the one person I had tried to love and provide for the most. I wanted to say something, to demand recognition for all the sacrifices I had made for them, but I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I smiled, nodding, trying to hide the hurt, pretending to be happy for them. Sounds wonderful, I said. I hope you both enjoy it. Brian grinned, oblivious to the tension that hung in the air. He nodded, and the conversation moved on. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being slowly erased from their lives. I wasn't the father anymore, the provider. I was just the old man who handed out the gifts, the one who worked behind the scenes and who, apparently, no longer mattered. Later that evening, after dinner was over and the laughter of the younger crowd had faded, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the small lottery ticket in my hands. Wu Meiyan, a gift, she had called it, but in truth, it was nothing more than an afterthought. It wasn't even the value of the ticket that stung, it was the thoughtlessness behind it, the knowledge that I had given up everything for my children, and they didn't even see it. As the house settled into its quiet evening, I found myself unable to sleep. The hours dragged on, and all I could do was stare at the ceiling, my mind racing through memories of long nights spent in the garage, of the sacrifices I had made, of the love I had poured into my family, hoping for something in return, anything. But all I had now was this ticket, a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. The house was quieter than usual after Amanda and Brian left. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the small lottery ticket in front of me, its bright colors now muted under the dim kitchen light. It felt like a symbol of everything I had sacrificed and worked for. A single slip of paper, meant to bring some joy, now felt like a punch in the gut. I should have been grateful for the gift. I should have smiled and said thank you, grateful that my daughter thought of me at all. But I couldn't. I couldn't pretend that this was enough. This wasn't just a lottery ticket. This was a reminder of how far I had fallen in her eyes. A reminder that, after everything I had done, this, this was all I was worth. But what did I expect? A fancy car? A trip to Europe? No, a simple thank you would have sufficed. That's all I wanted. To feel appreciated. To feel like I mattered. It was funny, isn't it, how the most insignificant things, like a $5 lottery ticket, you could bring everything into focus. For years, I had been putting in the work double shifts at the shop, weekends spent away from home. I had sacrificed everything to make sure my kids had what they needed. College tuition, extracurricular activities, everything. But all that seemed to be forgotten the moment Amanda found Brian. Suddenly, he was the hero in their little fairy tale. And me, I was the invisible man. I glanced over at the spot where Amanda had sat just hours before. That little smile of hers, so full of excitement and warmth. But it felt hollow now. I ran my hand over the smooth surface of the lottery ticket, trying to steady my shaking fingers. I felt a tightness in my chest. Maybe it was the cold that had seeped through the walls. Or maybe it was the weight of my own thoughts. That night, after I had cleaned up the remnants of the dinner, I found myself pacing around the house. The ticking of the clock on the wall was the only sound that kept me company. I kept thinking about the way Amanda had smiled when she handed me that ticket, and how Brian had reacted to his extravagant gift. The more I thought about it, the more it gnawed at me. How could they be so blind? It wasn't just the money that bothered me. It was the blatant disregard for everything I had done for her. I had spent my life working hard to give her a future, and now it felt like she had just tossed me aside, as if I were no more important than a piece of furniture, something that could be ignored once the new shiny thing appeared. But that night, as I sat in my recliner, staring at the ticket, something in me shifted. It wasn't about the gift anymore. It wasn't about the money. It was about respect. It was about finally standing up for myself. For the years I had spent making sure they had everything they needed. And now all I had was this petty, insignificant gift. The next morning, as I prepared for another long day at the shop, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I decided I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to let her treat me like this. I called the number on the back of the lottery ticket and followed the automated prompts. The voice on the other end was cheerful, almost annoyingly so. "Good morning, you've reached the Ontario Lottery Corporation. How can I help you today? I'd like to check the status of a ticket I have," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. After a brief pause, the voice on the other end spoke again. "Please provide your ticket number." I recited the numbers from memory, the numbers Amanda had casually tossed to me the night before, the ones I had stared at for hours, wondering what my life had become. The pause felt like an eternity before the woman spoke again. "Congratulations, Mr. Woods. You are the winner of the $150 million Powerball jackpot." The words hit me like a freight train. My mind raced. A million thoughts collided in my head. But the one that stood out the most was, I can't believe this. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the jackpot. It was about the fact that I had been handed something so extraordinary in a moment of frustration, after feeling like I was worth so little to the one person I had loved and given everything for. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice shocky. "Tudes, I need some time to process this." "Thank you." As the call ended, I sat there for a long time, the weight of it all sinking in. $150 million. I had never even dreamed of that kind of money. And yet, here it was. I looked down at the crumpled ticket in my hand, a gift that had seemed so insignificant as I stood up and walked around the house. The realization slowly dawned on me. I didn't have to play by their rules anymore. I didn't have to sit by and let my daughter and her husband dictate my worth. I had options now. But what did I want to do with this newfound freedom? The answer wasn't as simple as I thought. A few days later, I decided to confront Amanda. I had to. I needed her to understand the reality of what had happened. To know that I wasn't the same man I used to be. The man who sat in silence, accepting whatever scraps they threw my way. The moment I picked up the phone to call her, my hands shook. I had spent my entire life putting others first, swallowing my pride, letting my children take the lead. But now I had something that could change everything. "Hi, Dad," Amanda answered on the first ring, her voice cheerful, as if everything were normal. "Amanda," I said, my voice calm, but firm. "We need to talk." She laughed lightly, not taking me seriously. "Sure. What's up?" "I've been thinking about that lottery ticket you gave me," I began, keeping my tone neutral. "And I've come to a decision." There was silence on the other end, and I could practically hear her brain working, trying to figure out where this conversation was going. "I'm not sharing the winnings." "Amanda," I said, each word deliberate. "That ticket was a gift from you, but it wasn't a contract. You didn't buy it with the intention of splitting the winnings. Did you?" Her tone shifted instantly. "Dad, come on. You're not serious. You know I was joking about the half being mine." "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not joking either. You made a joke about it. But this is real, and I don't think you understand just how much this money means to me. How much it means to finally have something of my own. You don't get to just take what's mine anymore." "Amanda." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, and for the first time, I wondered if she was starting to get it, starting to understand just how much I had sacrificed for her, and how much this betrayal had hurt. "I think you should respect that," I continued, my words more forceful now. "I've spent my whole life putting you and your brother first. I've never asked for anything in return. But now, it's time for me to start looking out for myself. This is my chance, and I'm not going to let you take that from me." Amanda's voice wavered slightly. "Dad, please. I didn't mean for things to go this far, but it's still family money. We should share it." "Family money," I echoed. "You took from me." "Amanda, and that's not how family works." The line went silent again, and for a moment, I thought she might actually get it. But then, she sighed. "I'll talk to Brian. We'll figure something out," she said, her voice distant. "But this isn't over." "Dad." "You'll see." I hung up the phone, my heart pounding. I had done it. I had finally said what I needed to say. The power was in my hands now. If you're enjoying this story so far, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your friends and family. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. Do you think David did the right thing by standing up for himself? What would you do in his shoes? Let's keep the conversation going. The following days felt like an eternity. The excitement from the lottery win had faded, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty that sat heavy in my chest. At first, I had been elated who wouldn't be with $150 million in their grasp. But now, with every passing moment, the weight of it all was beginning to settle in. And it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the price I had paid to get here. It was about the betrayal. And it was about the realization that I had spent my whole life building everything for my family, only to find that I wasn't as important to them as I had believed. I tried to move on. to focus on the opportunities that the money now gave me. But it wasn't easy. The quiet in the house was deafening. My daughter, Amanda, had called a few times in the days following our conversation. But each time I let the phone ring, I couldn't face her just yet. I needed time. And maybe she did too. What I had said to her had to have stung. Maybe it would be a wake-up call. Maybe she would realize that I wasn't going to be taken for granted anymore. But deep down, I wasn't sure if anything would change. My life had always revolved around them. Amanda, her brother, the whole family. I had worked tirelessly to give them the life I had never had growing up. My father had been a hard-working man, just like me, but his struggles had been his own. I had promised myself that I would do better for my children, but as I sat in my kitchen, staring out the window at the snowflakes drifting down, I realized that no matter how much I had given, it was never going to be enough. I had done everything for them. Double shifts at the shop, I'd missed birthdays, anniversaries, and even the simple moments that mattered. And now, Amanda, my own daughter, had used me, used my money without asking, thinking it was hers for the taking, as though my efforts had meant nothing. The whole thing seemed so small, so petty in the grand scheme of things. But it was the principle of it. It was the lack of respect, the assumption that I would always be there to pick up the pieces when they needed me. Well, that was over. I went to the garage the next day to clear my head. I hadn't spent much time there since the lottery win. The shop, once a place of constant activity, now felt eerily quiet. The worn-out floors, the old tools that had seen better days, the lingering scent of motor oil, it all felt familiar, grounding in some way. Here, I didn't have to be anyone other than who I was. Here, I could just work. There was no judgment, no expectations. But as I walked through the shop, my thoughts kept drifting back to Amanda. It was like I couldn't escape her. I tried to focus on the engine in front of me, but her face kept flashing in my mind. Her bright smile when she had handed me that stupid lottery ticket. The words she had said so carelessly. "Half of it is mine." I could still hear them in my head. I threw myself into work. The engine in front of me was an old 1967 Mustang, a car that needed a lot of attention. I figured it would take my mind off things, but all it did was make me feel more isolated. The car was a mess, rusted parts, worn-out interior, a complete overhaul needed. But the more I worked, the more I realized I was doing the same thing with my life, trying to fix something that was already beyond repair. By the end of the day, I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. I decided to head home, but as I stepped out of the shop, I noticed a familiar figure standing at my front door. It was Amanda. I froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. It had been days since I'd last spoken to her, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to face her. But there she was, standing on my doorstep, her expression serious, almost apologetics. I walked slowly toward her, my heart pounding in my chest. "Amanda," I said, my voice measured. "What do you want?" Her eyes softened as she looked at me, but there was a tension in her shoulders. "Dad," she said quietly, "I think we need to talk." She didn't wait for me to respond, but stepped inside when I opened the door. We sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where she had handed me that ridiculous lottery ticket days ago. I could feel the weight of the moment, the air thick with unspoken words. "I'm sorry," she said finally, breaking the silence. "I shouldn't have done what I did. I know it was wrong. I thought you would be happy for me. For us." Brian and I have been through a lot lately, and I guess I was just trying to make things better. I watched her, unsure of how to react. For the first time in what felt like forever, Amanda looked vulnerable. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by something I hadn't seen in years: regret. And in that moment, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to forgive her, to go back to the way things were. But I couldn't. Not yet. You think a vacation for Brian is going to make things better? I said, my voice rougher than I intended. You think that's what I've been working for all these years? For you to take my money and give it to him, while I'm left with a $5 joke. That's what you think of me? Amanda flinched at my words. But I didn't stop. I've spent my whole life providing for you. I worked myself into the ground to make sure you had everything you needed. And this is how you repay me. You think I don't deserve any of it. Tears welled up in her eyes. And for a moment, I thought she might break down right there. But instead, she wiped them away and looked at me. Her expression now a mixture of guilt and frustration. I never meant to hurt you. Dad, I didn't think it through. I didn't know what to do. Brian has been pushing me so much, and I've been under so much pressure. I didn't know how to handle it. So I just took the easy way out. I stared at her. The silence between us, deafening. And then, for the first time in days, I let my anger subside. I could see the pain in her eyes, the genuine remorse. I knew what it was like to feel pressure, to feel like everything was falling apart. But it didn't excuse what she had done. I can't just forget this. Amanda, I said, my voice softening, what you did was wrong. But it's not too late. We can fix this. But you have to understand that it's not just about money. It's about respect. And it's about acknowledging everything I've done for you and for this family. She nodded slowly, her eyes not leaving mine. I know, Dad. I understand. And I'm sorry. I didn't think it through. He promised I'll do better. I'll make it right. For the first time in a long time, I believed her. But that didn't mean everything was fixed. It didn't mean I was ready to forgive her completely. It was going to take time, and time was something I had in abundance now. We sat there for a while, the tension between us easing, but it was clear that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. I had my money. Yes. But what I really wanted was my family back. The family that had once trusted me, looked up to me, and believed in me. But somehow, over the years, I had lost that, and it was going to take more than just a few words to get it back. The days that followed were, in many ways, the hardest I'd ever lived through. It's strange how the quiet after a storm can be even more unsettling than the chaos of the storm itself. When Amanda left my house that evening, I wasn't sure where we stood. Her apology had been heartfelt, but it was still just words. And words alone had never been enough to erase the hurt. I needed time to process, to think about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the lies, and the reality that I had spent my entire life trying to build something, only to have it all shattered in a single, careless moment. That night, I went to bed early, but sleep didn't come easy. I kept replaying our conversation in my mind, hearing the guilt in her voice, but also hearing the defensiveness. It was like she was still trying to justify her actions, trying to explain away the hurt. And maybe that was the hardest part of it all, how easily she had justified taking from me, from the very person who had given her everything. It wasn't about the $13. Ling, ling, ling. She'd taken, nor was it about the luxury vacation she'd gifted Brian. It was about something deeper, about how she had stopped seeing me as her father, As someone who had sacrificed everything to raise her, she had stopped seeing me as a person, and I had become a tool in her life. Someone to be used when it was convenient, when it suited her. The following days were filled with a tense silence. I went to work at the shop, but my mind was elsewhere. Every time I looked at the clock, I felt the pressure of time passing, and every second seemed to add to the weight of the unresolved feelings I had inside. Amanda called a couple of times, but I didn't pick up. I couldn't bring myself to talk to her just yet. I wasn't ready to forgive, and I wasn't ready to forget. I spent most of my time in the garage, working on cars, trying to clear my mind. The rhythmic sound of the wrench against metal, the sharp smell of oil and gasoline. They were grounding, comforting in their own way. When you work with your hands, it's easier to push everything else to the back of your mind, to focus on the task at hand. But even then, I could feel the weight of the situation pressing on me. And then, just when I thought I might finally be able to start letting go, the phone rang. It was Amanda. I didn't pick up right away. I just stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the answer button. I wanted to hear what she had to say, but I didn't want to hear excuses. I didn't want her to tell me how sorry she was again. I needed something more than words. The phone kept ringing, the sound slicing through the silence of the shop. I was tempted to let it go to voicemail, to avoid dealing with it altogether. But then I thought of her face, how tired and defeated she had looked the night she came to my house, how she had finally admitted, if only for a moment, that she was wrong. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the time she would truly understand. I swiped to answer the call, my heart pounding in my chest. "Dad." Amanda's voice came through, soft and uncertain. "I need to talk to you." I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. "What is it?" "Amanda, I know you're probably still angry," she began, her voice trembling. "But I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I realized something. Something I don't think I really saw before." I didn't say anything. I waited for her to continue, unsure if I was ready to hear whatever she was about to say. "I've been so caught up in my own life, my own problems, that I didn't see how much I was hurting you. I was so focused on trying to fix things with Brian, on making everything look perfect, that I forgot about the most important person in my life, my dad, the man who gave up everything for me." Her words hit me like a wave, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she was starting to get it. But then I remembered the $13. Ling, ling, ling. The money, the betrayal, and the part of me that was still angry, the part that still felt like she had taken something from me, rose up again. "You can't just take money from me." "Amanda," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You can't just use me when it's convenient. You can't use my hard work as your personal bank account." "I know. Dad, I'm sorry. I really am," she said quickly. "I was wrong. I see that now. I've been selfish. And I've hurt you." I rubbed my eyes, trying to stay calm. This was the part where I had to make a decision. I had to decide if I was going to forgive her, if I was going to let her back into my life the way it was before. But could I really do that? "I know you're sorry, Amanda," I said, my voice softening just a bit. "But I can't just pretend that this didn't happen. I can't forget what you did. You took from me. And it's not just about the money. It's about respect. You've lost my trust. And that's going to take time to rebuild." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I understand, Dad," she said quietly. "I know it's going to take time. I need you to know that I am truly sorry. I don't want to lose you. I never wanted to hurt you. I closed my eyes, leaning back against the workbench. The weight of her words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, I felt a sense of relief. I wasn't sure if this was the beginning of healing or just another empty apology. But I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that there was still a chance for us. I don't know what to say. Amanda, I finally replied, but I think we both need time. I need time to process all of this. I need time to figure out what comes next. I understand. Dad, I'll give you all the time you need. But I want you to know that I'm here. I'm here for you. No matter what. We stayed on the phone for a few more minutes, talking in circles. There wasn't much more to say. The damage had been done. But in those few minutes, I felt a small shift. It wasn't much. But it was enough to make me feel like maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. When I finally hung up the phone, I sat there for a while, staring at the shop floor beneath me. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I could ever trust Amanda again. But I had to believe that there was still hope. I had to believe that, in the end, we could make things right. I stood up and walked to the workbench, grabbing the old wrench I had been using earlier. There was something therapeutic about working with my hands, about focusing on something tangible. It gave me a sense of control, of purpose. I worked well into the night, the rhythmic sound of the wrench soothing me, pushing the uncertainty to the back of my mind. But even as I worked, I knew this was only the beginning. There was a long road ahead of me, one that I wasn't sure I was ready to travel. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I might be able to take the first step. The shop was quiet the next morning, the sound of tools hitting metal, the familiar hum of the engine in front of me. Everything was like a distant echo of the life I had always known. The weight of the conversation with Amanda still hung in the air. But for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like the only thing that mattered. There was something else, something new, something that had shifted inside me. I had spent so many years making sure everyone else's needs were met. I had given everything to my family, poured my heart into them, worked endless hours without a second thought, all in the name of love. And yet, all it had taken was a moment of betrayal for me to realize how little I had been living for myself. For the first time, I was starting to feel like I had something of my own. The $150 million win had been a shock, no doubt. But it wasn't just the money. It was the power that came with it, the power to make my own decisions, to not be beholden to anyone, to finally choose what I wanted for myself. It was a terrifying kind of freedom, but it was mine. And that realization changed everything. I couldn't stop thinking about the possibilities. What would I do with all this money? What would I do with my life, now that I had the chance to finally live for myself? The thought of starting fresh was both exhilarating and daunting. For so long, my identity had been tied to being a father, a provider, a man who was always there for others. Now, for the first time, I had the chance to be something more, someone who could choose his own path. As I worked on the car in front of me, my mind kept drifting back to Amanda. Her apology had been heartfelt, but there was still so much unspoken between us. She had admitted that she was wrong, but there was a part of me that couldn't just let go of the feeling of betrayal. The money was one thing, but it was the trust I had placed in her that hurt the most. And maybe that was something that couldn't be fixed so easily. I thought about how far we had drifted over the years. I had been so focused on providing for her, on giving her everything she could possibly need, that I had forgotten to be the father I used to be. Somewhere along the way, I had become a silent presence in her life, a background figure who only existed to provide, and now I was paying the price for that. But as I stood there, tightening the bolts on the engine, I realized something important. I wasn't that man anymore. The man who would bend over backward to make sure others were happy. The man who would sacrifice his own happiness for the sake of family. That man was gone. And in his place stood someone different. Someone who could say no. Someone who could finally live for himself. It was a strange thought. One that felt almost foreign, but it was a thought that brought with it a sense of peace. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I was ready to face it on my own terms. The phone buzzed on the workbench beside me, breaking me from my thoughts. It was a text from Amanda. Dad, I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about. I know things have been hard between us, but I want you to know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm ready to work on rebuilding our relationship. I love you, and I don't want to lose you. Please, let me know when you're ready to talk. I stared at the screen for a moment, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. It wasn't the first time she had reached out, but something about this message felt different. There was a sincerity in her words, a vulnerability that I hadn't heard from her before. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't ready to forgive her completely. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. But I also knew that I didn't want to close the door entirely. Maybe it wasn't about forgiving her right away. Maybe it was about giving myself the space to process everything, to heal, before I made any decisions. I typed out a response, my fingers moving slowly over the keys. I'm not sure when I'll be ready. Amanda, but I'll let you know. I just need time. I hit send and immediately regretted it. Was that too harsh? Too cold? I didn't know anymore. All I knew was that I wasn't going to rush into anything. I wasn't going to let anyone else dictate how I should feel or what I should do. I put the phone down and went back to work. But this time, I worked with a different kind of energy. There was a renewed sense of purpose in my hands as I fixed the car, as I tightened the bolts and smoothed out the dents. For the first time in a long time, I was working for myself, not for Amanda, not for anyone else, just for me. As the day wore on, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in ages, I felt like I had control over it. I wasn't just drifting along anymore. I was taking charge of my own life. Later that evening, as the last light of day faded from the sky, I sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window. The world outside was quiet, the streets empty, except for the occasional car passing by. It was the kind of stillness that made you reflect on everything, the kind of quiet that forced you to confront the truth. I thought about the choices I had made, the sacrifices, the moments I had given up for the sake of others, and now, with everything I had won, I had the chance to choose something different, something for myself. I didn't know where this journey would take me. I didn't know if Amanda and I would ever fully reconcile. But I knew this: I was no longer the man I had been. I wasn't the one who gave everything and asked for nothing in return. I wasn't the man who let others take from me, who let his own needs fall to the wayside for the sake of family. I was someone else now, someone stronger, someone who could finally live for himself. And as I sat there in the quiet of my kitchen, I made a decision. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the freedom to make my own choices, to live the life I wanted, without anyone else's expectations or demands. Maybe this was my chance to finally be who I was meant to be. The days had a way of blending together now. The shop, the quiet of my home, the never-ending hum of the life I had built, they all felt like parts of a routine I had long outgrown. But even so, the calm, quiet routine was a welcome change from the chaos that had erupted in my life just a short time ago. I'd spent so many years fighting for everyone else, putting my own needs last, that now, with this new sense of freedom, I wasn't sure what to do with myself. Amanda's text lingered in my thoughts. The sincerity in her words, not entirely convincing, but not entirely dismissive either. She'd apologized, admitted her mistakes, and had even promised to work on rebuilding our relationship. But how could I trust that? How could I simply let go of everything, forgive her, and go back to the way things were before I wasn't sure? I was tired. Tired of the expectations. Tired of the sacrifices. And yet, the idea of reconciliation with my daughter, with the family I had worked so hard to create, still tugged at my heart. Could I truly rebuild what had been broken? Or would I just be setting myself up for more pain, more disappointment? I was sitting at the kitchen table one morning when I received another call. This time, it wasn't Amanda. It was my lawyer, Ryan. He had been handling the paperwork for my lottery win, and I'd been avoiding his calls for the past few days. But today, I answered, "David, I've got the initial paperwork for you to sign," Ryan said, his voice as calm as always. "We've set up a meeting with the financial advisors to go over your options. I'd like to discuss your next steps before we proceed." The mention of financial advisors made me uneasy. I had won a fortune, but I had no idea how to manage that kind of wealth. It wasn't something I had ever thought about before. My life had always been about getting by, not about getting rich. "I'm not sure when I can meet," I said, my voice sounding strained. "Things are a little complicated right now. David, I understand you've been going through a lot, but this is important," Ryan said, his tone turning more serious. "The longer you wait, the more complicated it becomes. You've got to make some decisions about how you want to handle this money. I know it's overwhelming, but I'm here to guide you through it." I took a deep breath and let the words sink in. He was right. I couldn't avoid this forever. The money was mine now, and I needed to take control of it. But there was something else weighing on me. Something far more important than the money, the trust that had been broken between me and Amanda. For days, I had avoided making a decision about her, about us. I wasn't sure what the right choice was. Forgiving her meant allowing myself to be vulnerable again, to open myself up to the possibility of being hurt. But at the same time, how could I hold on to the anger, the resentment? For the rest of my life, I had spent years putting her needs first, and all I had gotten in return was betrayal. And now, I was supposed to let her back into my life, just like that. But I also knew something deep down: if I couldn't learn to trust again, if I couldn't find a way to forgive, I would be trapped. Trapped by my own bitterness. Trapped by my own pain. And that wasn't a life I wanted to live. That night, after working late in the shop, I decided to take a walk. The air was cold, the wind biting against my face as I walked through the quiet streets of the neighborhood. The familiar sights of my community were comforting, yet somehow distant. I passed the old diner, where I had spent so many quiet mornings with friends. The small grocery store where I had bought candy for Amanda when she was little. These places used to hold so much meaning to me, but now they felt like relics of a past that was slipping further and further away. I had been walking for what felt like hours when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting it to be another work-related message. But instead, it was from Amanda. "Dad, can we talk? I know I've hurt you, and I want to make things right. Please, let me explain." I stood there for a moment, staring at the message. My heart pounded in my chest as I reread the words. This wasn't the first time she had reached out, but something about this message felt different. There was no defensiveness, no excuses, just a simple request to talk. And in that moment, I realized that this was the first step. If I was ever going to move forward, I had to be willing to listen. Even if I didn't have all the answers, I typed out a quick response. Okay, let's meet tomorrow. The next day, Amanda arrived at my house just as the sun began to set. She looked tired, worn out even. Her usual confidence replaced with an uncertainty I hadn't seen in her before. I knew that this conversation was important, perhaps the most important one we had ever had. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was deafening, filled with all the things we hadn't said to each other. I know you're angry with me, she said quietly, breaking the silence. And I deserve it. I took from you. I took your trust. And I'm so sorry. I know I can't take back what I did, but I want to make it right. I want to rebuild what we had. I listened to her words, trying to keep my emotions in check. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but I still couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that lingered in the pit of my stomach. You took something from me. Amanda, I said, my voice low but steady. It wasn't just the money. It was my trust. You thought it was okay to use me, to take what wasn't yours. And that hurts more than anything. I know. Dad, she said, her voice breaking. I was wrong. I was so caught up in everything that I didn't see how much I was hurting you. And I'm so sorry. I don't want to lose you. There it was again, the apology. The same words I had heard a dozen times before. But this time, I was listening. This time, I was hearing the pain in her voice, the regret in her eyes. I don't know if I can just forgive and forget, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. I don't know if I can go back to the way things were. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to listen. And I'm willing to give you the chance to show me that you can be the daughter I used to know. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of hope. It wasn't the kind of hope that erased everything that had happened, but it was a hope that maybe, just maybe, we could start to rebuild, one step at a time. We sat there for hours, talking through everything that had happened, the mistakes, the misunderstandings, the hurt. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick, but it was a start. As Amanda left my house that evening, I watched her walk down the driveway, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel alone. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight, but at least we were on the path. And that was more than I had hoped for just a few days ago. I wasn't sure where this would lead. I wasn't sure if Amanda and I would ever fully heal. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had something worth fighting for. The sun was setting again as I sat in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. I had gotten used to the silence, the space to think, but there was something different about it now. Since my conversation with Amanda, a strange mix of hope and doubt had taken root in my heart. We had talked, and she had apologized. But there was still so much left unsaid. There was still so much that had been broken, and I wasn't sure if we could ever put the pieces back together. The meeting had gone well. In a way, we had both admitted our mistakes, acknowledged the pain. But that was only the beginning. It wasn't enough to just say the words. It wasn't enough to simply apologize and hope that everything would go back to normal. I wasn't that naive. I had spent too many years holding the pieces of a broken family together with nothing more than hope and a prayer, and that hadn't worked out well for me. The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, pulling me out of my thoughts. I stared at it for a moment, debating whether or not to answer, but I knew who it was before I even looked. It was Amanda. I had been avoiding her calls for days now. I had let the silence build between us because In truth, I wasn't sure what to say. The wound was still fresh, and every time I thought I might be ready to forgive, I would remember the betrayal, the lies, the stolen money. But I couldn't avoid it forever. I had already made the decision to give her a chance, to try to rebuild what had been broken, and now it was time to face the consequences of that decision. I picked up the phone and swiped to answer. Dad. Amanda's voice came through, quieter than usual. I know you've been busy, but I wanted to talk. I think it's time we discuss what happens next. It took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. What do you mean? I asked, my voice hoarse from the sleepless nights. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about the money, about how we can move forward. As a family, I don't want things to be like this anymore. I could hear the sincerity in her voice, but there was still something guarded in her tone, something that made me wary. I wasn't sure I could trust her yet, but the desire to believe in her was still there, buried beneath the layers of hurt and disappointment. I don't know. Amanda, I said slowly, I don't know if we can just pick up where we left off. There's a lot of damage here, a lot of trust that's been broken. I don't know if I'm ready to just let that go. I know. Dad, she replied, her voice shaking slightly, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I don't want to lose you. I want us to be a family again. I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. There was a part of me that wanted to believe her. There was a part of me that wanted to forgive, to move past the mistakes, to let the past go. But there was another part of me, a part that had been hurt too many times, a part that knew better than to trust too quickly. I don't know if I can just forgive and forget, I said, my voice softer now, but I'm willing to try. Amanda, I'm willing to work through this, but it's going to take time. It's going to take more than just words. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I understand. Dad, I just want to make things right. I'll prove to you that I can be the daughter you once knew. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I hope so. Amanda, I really do. We ended the call soon after. Both of us left in the silence that followed. It wasn't the closure I was hoping for, but it was a start, a fragile start. And maybe that's all we could hope for right now. As the days passed, things didn't change as quickly as I had hoped. Amanda kept reaching out, texting and calling, trying to make up for the lost time. But there was still something that lingered between us. The trust hadn't been rebuilt. It was still broken, still fragile, still in need of repair. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in the shop again, working on a car that didn't really need fixing. It wasn't a special project, it was just something to keep my hands busy, to keep my mind occupied. But as I turned the wrench, the weight of everything kept pressing on me. The money, the betrayal, the silence between me and my daughter. I had always prided myself on being a hard worker, on being a man of integrity. But now, with all this money, all these opportunities at my fingertips, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been lost. My relationship with Amanda wasn't the only thing that had been broken. Somewhere along the way, I had lost my own sense of who I was. I wasn't just the man who worked in the garage anymore. I wasn't just the father who sacrificed everything for his children. I wasn't sure what I was anymore. The phone buzzed again, snapping me out of my thoughts. This time, it wasn't Amanda. It was my lawyer, Ryan, David. I've been reviewing the paperwork for your assets. We're moving forward with setting up your foundation, but I need your final input on a few things. I rubbed my forehead, trying to push through the exhaustion that was weighing on me. What do you need from me? I asked, my voice tired but steady. We need to discuss your plans for the funds. You have the option to invest some of the money, create a trust, or donate to causes you care about. It's time to make some decisions about your legacy. Legacy. It was a word that felt foreign to me, a word I had never really thought about before. My legacy had always been about my family, about Amanda, about my work, about providing. But now, with all this money, what was I really leaving behind? What did I want to be remembered for? I'm not sure what I want to do just yet. I said, my voice quieter now. I've still got some things to figure out, but I don't want this money to just sit there. I want it to mean something. That's a good start, Ryan said. We can discuss more options when you're ready. But time is ticking. David, the sooner we finalize these decisions, the better. I agreed to schedule another meeting. But the truth was, I wasn't ready. I didn't know what I wanted to do with the money. I didn't know what kind of legacy I wanted to leave behind. As I hung up the phone, I looked around the shop. The old cars, the worn tools, the place I had spent so many years of my life. It all felt like a distant memory now. There was more to life than fixing cars. More to life than money. I needed to figure out what that more was. I needed to find my purpose again. But I wasn't sure how. That night, I went to bed early. I had spent too many nights lying awake, thinking about Amanda, about the betrayal, about everything that had happened. But tonight, there was something different. There was a small flicker of hope. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe I could rebuild what had been broken not just with Amanda, but with myself. I wasn't sure how to start. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living in the past. I had to move forward. The days after the phone call with Amanda felt strangely weightless. Not in the way that a fresh start might feel light, full of promise, but in the way that the space between people can feel heavy. Even as I tried to settle into a rhythm, the unease lingered. The air in my house had a different texture now, a mixture of hesitation and uncertainty. I wasn't sure what was worse, the silence between Amanda and me, or the fact that I was still trying to figure out how to make things right. I kept thinking about our last conversation. The moments where Amanda had shown genuine remorse. She seemed to understand the depth of what she had done. But it wasn't just the words that mattered. It was the actions that would follow. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still waiting for something, waiting for her to prove she meant what she said. In the meantime, I threw myself into work. The shop, as always, was my refuge. The engine in front of me became my focus, my distraction. I liked the simplicity of it, turning wrenches, fixing machines that could be put together again. Unlike the people in my life, these machines didn't break in ways that couldn't be fixed. But even in the hum of the shop, there was always the underlying current of what was happening with Amanda. It was always there, like an echo in my mind. I'd find myself stopping mid-task, lost in thought, wondering how we could go back from this, or if we even should. The phone buzzed again, and as usual, my heart skipped a beat before I even saw the name. Amanda. She'd been reaching out regularly, trying to reconnect, but I'd been avoiding her calls, giving myself time to breathe, to think. I wasn't ready for more conversations that only left me feeling uncertain. But there she was, again, knocking at the door of my peace. I stared at the phone, deliberating. It wasn't that I didn't want to talk to her. It was just that I wasn't sure what I was supposed to say. I swiped to answer, trying to sound as calm as possible. "Hello, Dad." Amanda's voice was soft, cautious, like she wasn't sure how I would respond. "I know it's been a while, and I haven't heard from you much, but I wanted to tell you something. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I think I'm ready to do whatever it takes to make things right between us. He took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. What do you mean? Amanda, I said slowly. I've heard you say that before. She was quiet for a moment, as if unsure of how to continue. I know, but this time is different. Dad, I'm ready to prove to you that I'm serious. I've already started seeing a therapist. I need to understand what I've been doing wrong. And I know it's not going to be easy. But I want to change. I want to fix this. The words hit me harder than I expected. Amanda had never been one to ask for help, to admit she needed anything, especially from me. This was a side of her I had never seen before, vulnerable, honest, and more than a little broken. I stayed quiet for a moment, taking it all in. That's a big step. Amanda, I said, my voice softening. I'm glad you're doing that. But you know it's not just about you. Right. It's about both of us. It's about trust. About me being able to believe in you again. I know. Dad, she said quickly. And I'm not asking for all of that right away. I just want the chance to show you that I can be the daughter you always hoped for. I can prove that to you. I want to try. I wasn't sure what I was feeling in that moment. Relief. Maybe. But also something else. A deep weariness. For so long, I had been the one doing the giving, the one making all the sacrifices, and now, after everything that had happened, I was supposed to open up, to trust her again. Could I do that? I'm willing to try, I said after a long pause. But you've got to understand, it's not just about saying the words, it's about showing me I can't go back to the way things were before. Not right now. Not until I know this isn't just another empty promise. I understand, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll prove it to you. Dad, I will. I set the phone down after the call ended, still processing what had just happened. It wasn't the grand gesture I had expected. It wasn't the kind of apology that erased the past. It wasn't a magical fix. But for the first time, I believed her words. For the first time, I felt like she wasn't just trying to patch things up with more empty apologies. She was doing the hard work. She was putting in the effort. But was that enough? The next day, I found myself walking down the quiet streets of my neighborhood. The sun was low in the sky, casting a golden glow over everything. I had always enjoyed these walks, these moments of peace. But today, my mind was elsewhere. I thought about the conversations with Amanda, about how much she had changed in just a short time, how much she seemed to regret her actions. But even as I thought about her efforts, I couldn't help but wonder if it was too late. Was I too far gone? Too hurt? To ever really forgive her? And even if I did, would we ever get back to the way things were before? It was during this walk that something happened. I passed by the old coffee shop where I used to meet my friends on Saturdays. It was a quiet, unassuming place, but it had always felt like home to me. As I walked by, I noticed a familiar face sitting at a corner table. It was Paul, the father of Brian, Amanda's husband. I hadn't seen him in months, maybe longer. I had never been particularly close with him, but I had always respected him. Paul was the kind of man who valued honesty, integrity. He had a certain strength about him that I admired, though I had never quite found a reason to engage with him much. But now, for some reason, seeing him sitting there, I couldn't ignore the pull to speak with him. I walked in, and he looked up from his coffee with a surprised but warm smile. David, my friend, it's been a while. How've you been? I smiled back, nodding as I sat down across from him. I've been better. And Paul, you know how it is. You look like you've been carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, he said, raising an eyebrow. What's going on? Everything okay with Amanda? The question took me by surprise. How did you know? I asked, almost defensively. I know my son, Paul replied with a knowing smile. And I've been hearing things. Word travels fast. You know, but I'm not here to gossip. I just wanted to check in. I know you and Amanda have had your differences, but from what I've gathered, she's been trying to make amends. She has, I said, my voice softer now. But I don't know if I can just forgive her. I don't know if I'm ready to let go of everything that's happened. Paul nodded thoughtfully, taking a sip of his coffee. You know, David, forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's not about erasing the past. It's about giving yourself peace. It's about letting go of the weight so that you can move forward. I know it's hard, but you don't have to do it alone. I looked at Paul, his words hanging in the air. Maybe that was it. Maybe I had been holding on to the past for too long, letting the pain define who I was. Maybe, in order to move forward, I needed to let go, not of Amanda, but of the anger, the hurt. I hadn't realized how much it had been eating away at me, how much I had been holding on to it, carrying it around like a burden. I don't know if I'm ready to forgive her yet, I said finally, but I think I'm starting to understand what it might take. It's not just about her making amends. It's about me choosing to let go. Paul gave me a reassuring smile. You'll get there. David, it's not easy, but you'll get there. I stood up to leave, feeling a little lighter than I had before. The conversation with Paul had opened my eyes to something I hadn't fully grasped. It wasn't just about Amanda. It wasn't just about the money or the betrayal. It was about my own ability to forgive, to heal, to move on. When I got back home, I sat down at the kitchen table once again, staring at the quiet of my house. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was beginning to understand what it meant to be free. There were still hurdles to overcome, still wounds to heal, but I was ready for it. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was ready to move forward. It's funny how life has a way of throwing us curveballs. For months, everything had felt like it was spiraling out of control. I had been stuck in this place of hurt, betrayal, and confusion. I couldn't see a way out. Couldn't understand how things had gotten so messed up. But now, as I sat at my kitchen table with the weight of the past few months behind me, I felt something different, a sense of calm. The conversation with Paul had been the turning point. It wasn't the kind of conversation where you expect an immediate fix, where everything falls into place in an instant. But it gave me something that I had been desperately needing: perspective. It wasn't just about Amanda's actions or the money. It was about me. It was about letting go of the anger, about understanding that forgiveness was as much for me as it was for her. It wasn't easy. It never is. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had been holding on to the past out of fear. Fear of being hurt again. Fear of being disappointed. But holding on to that fear had only kept me stuck in a place where I couldn't move forward. I had made progress. I knew that, but now it was time to take the next step. The problem was, I didn't know what the next step looked like. I didn't know what it meant to start rebuilding the trust that had been broken. Amanda had apologized. But words were only the beginning. The real test, the real challenge, was going to be what happened next. I spent the next few days lost in thought. Work in the shop had slowed down a little, so I had more time to think about everything. I found myself thinking about Amanda, about how much she had changed in such a short period of time. I thought about how difficult it had been for her to admit she was wrong, and how much she had hurt me. But I also thought about how much she had been willing to fight for me, for our relationship, and that gave me a sliver of hope. The evening after my conversation with Paul, Amanda called again. I hadn't been expecting it. But there it was, her name flashing on my phone. I hesitated for a moment before answering. There was still part of me that wasn't sure if I was ready. But deep down, I knew that if I didn't answer, I would just keep pushing her away. I had spent too many years pushing people away. I couldn't do it anymore. Hey, Dad. Amanda's voice came through, soft but steady. I was thinking about you, and I wanted to check in. How are you feeling? Her question caught me off guard. I had expected her to jump straight to an apology, to tell me again how sorry she was for everything. But this time, it was different. She wasn't just apologizing. She was giving me space to talk, to process, to be real with her. I'm doing okay, I said, my voice a little quieter than usual. It's been a lot, but I think I'm starting to understand things a little more now. I've been thinking about what you said, about trying to fix things, and I think I'm ready to give this a chance. But it's not going to be easy. We can't just pick up where we left off. I know, Amanda said quickly. I don't expect that. I'm not asking for everything to be fixed in one go. I just want to show you that I'm serious. I want to prove that I can be the daughter you need me to be. I could hear the sincerity in her voice. For the first time, it felt like she wasn't just trying to fix what was broken, she was trying to understand it. She was trying to understand me, to understand the hurt she had caused. I'm not sure how to get there yet, I said, my mind racing with all the things we still had to work through. But I think we're both on the same page now. We can start over. But it's going to take time. I can't just forget everything that happened. But I'm willing to try. I understand, she said, her voice softer now. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Dad, I know I've let you down, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it right. I paused for a moment, taking in her words. Could I really start over with her? Could I rebuild the trust? The bond that had been broken so carelessly I wasn't sure. But I knew I had to try. For both of us. I'll be here, I said, my voice steady. But we take it one step at a time. No rushing. No pretending everything's fine. We'll work through this. But it's on my terms. Amanda agreed. And for the first time in months, I felt like I had taken control. I wasn't just letting life happen to me anymore. I wasn't just reacting to what others did. I was deciding what I wanted. Deciding how I was going to move forward. The next few weeks were a blur of small steps forward. Amanda reached out often, and I began to see a change in her. A change that was more than just words. She started doing the hard work of showing me that she understood the gravity of her actions. She started making amends, not just with me, but with herself. And in doing so, she was teaching me how to forgive, how to let go of the bitterness I had been holding on to. But it wasn't just Amanda who had changed. I had changed too. For the first time in my life, I was letting go of the past. I was letting go of the anger, the resentment. I was letting go of the idea that I had to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. And that was the hardest part of all. I didn't realize how much of myself I had buried in the process of trying to make everyone else happy. I had put so much of my energy into fixing things for other people that I had forgotten how to fix things for myself. But now, with the money, with the opportunity to rebuild what had been lost, I was starting to understand what it meant to put myself first, for the first time in my life. One afternoon, Amanda came over for coffee, and as we sat together in my kitchen, I realized how much we had both changed, The tension had softened. The anger had subsided. And in its place was something new, something fragile but real. I've been thinking about the future. Dad, Amanda said, her eyes meeting mine. About what happens next. I know we can't go back to what we had, but I want us to have something. I want us to be able to build something from here. I looked at her for a moment, seeing her not as the daughter who had betrayed me, but as the daughter who was trying to make it right. It was hard to admit, but I could see the effort she was putting in, and that meant something. I'm not sure where we go from here, I said slowly, but I know we can't do it alone. We both need to keep doing the work, and maybe, just maybe, we can get to a place where we can trust each other again. Amanda nodded, her eyes full of gratitude. I'm willing to work for it. I just need you to know that, for the first time in a long time, I smiled. It wasn't a smile of complete resolution, but it was a start. It was a start toward healing, toward rebuilding something I thought was lost forever. And as I looked at Amanda, I realized that maybe the hardest part wasn't forgiving her. The hardest part was forgiving myself for letting so much time go by, for letting anger and fear cloud my judgment. But now, for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't about money or the things I had given up. It was about the possibility of building something new, a relationship, a future, a family. It was about moving forward, step by step, together. The weeks that followed our heart-to-heart were a whirlwind. Amanda and I took it slow, one step at a time, just as I had promised myself. At first, there were days when I couldn't shake the feeling that things might slip through my fingers. Could a father really forgive a daughter for something so deep? Could we rebuild trust after it had been shattered so completely? But with every phone call, every visit, I saw the effort Amanda was making. She wasn't just apologizing anymore. She was showing up consistently. I could see it in the way she acted, the way she worked on herself. It was more than words. It was actions. And that's what I needed. I couldn't say that all the pain was gone. It wasn't. The road ahead would still be difficult. It always is when something like this happens. But there was a new understanding between us now. An unspoken agreement that we both wanted to make it work, no matter how long it took. It was one quiet morning when I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. The sun had just risen, casting a soft glow through the window. I hadn't thought about the future much before. It had always been about survival, about getting through the next day, the next week. But now, sitting there in that moment of stillness, I realized I had more options. The money was part of it. Yes, but the real shift had come from inside me. The ability to see past my own hurt and choose to be better, to do better. The phone buzzed on the counter, pulling me out of my thoughts. I glanced at it and saw Amanda's name flashing on the screen. I hesitated before answering. The trust between us had been slowly rebuilding, but I wasn't sure where we stood. There was still a lingering uncertainty in my heart. Could I really let go of the past? Could we both heal fully? But as I swiped the screen to answer, I knew one thing: I had to keep moving forward. Hey, Dad. Amanda's voice came through, soft and warm. I was thinking about something. What's up? I replied, my voice steady but filled with that familiar wariness. I think it's time we talk about what happens next, what the future looks like. I don't want us to just keep going in circles. I want us to move forward, and I know it's not going to happen overnight. But we need to set some boundaries. We need to make sure we're both on the same page. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. For the first time, Amanda wasn't just apologizing. She was talking about the future, about moving forward in a healthy way. and that meant more than I could express. That sounds like a good idea, I said, my voice softer. We can talk about it. We have to keep taking it one step at a time. But I'm ready. I'm ready to see where this goes. I'm ready too. Dad? She said, her voice steady. I want to make sure that we both feel like we're working together on this. No more misunderstandings. No more pretending everything's okay when it's not. Agreed, I said, smiling slightly. We'll take it slow. We'll talk through everything. Figure out what works. But I'm here, and I'm willing to give this a chance. Over the following days, we met up regularly, not for dramatic heart-to-heart talks, but for those small, everyday moments that are so often overlooked. Coffee in the mornings, lunch at the diner, small chats that stretched into longer conversations about where we had both been, what we had both gone through, and how we wanted to move forward. But the most important thing was the clarity I began to feel, not just about Amanda, but about myself. I had spent so much of my life holding on to anger, carrying around the weight of hurt like a badge of honor. I had convinced myself that I had to keep doing it all alone, that my worth was defined by how much I sacrificed, and for the longest time, I had kept pushing my own needs to the back burner. But now, I was seeing things differently. Forgiveness wasn't just about letting someone else off the hook. It was about freeing myself. Through all of this, I came to understand something crucial. It wasn't just about Amanda's mistakes. It was about the mistakes I had made. Too, I had been blind to my own role in how things had gotten so broken. I had let the cycle of sacrifice and silence become so ingrained that I didn't know how to break it. It wasn't just Amanda who had to change. It was both of us. I had to stop expecting others to fill the spaces I had neglected in myself. I had to learn to say no when I needed to ask for what I wanted, not just what others expected from me. And most importantly, I had to learn to forgive myself. One day, we sat down again. This time with a little more certainty in our conversation. We talked about boundaries, about what it meant to heal and rebuild. It was slow, but it was steady. I could see the light of progress, even if it was just a faint glow in the distance. I've been thinking a lot, Amanda said, her voice filled with determination. About what you said before about us being a family again. It's not going to be like it was before, but it can still be something. We can still be something. I nodded, feeling a sense of hope stirring within me. It doesn't have to be the same, Amanda, but we can move forward. That's the most important thing. And just like that, we both understood. We didn't need to erase the past. We didn't need to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. We just needed to keep moving forward, step by step, with openness and honesty. No more pretending. As the weeks went on, I began to feel a sense of peace, not just because Amanda and I were beginning to rebuild, but because I was rebuilding too. I had been stuck in the past for so long, unable to see beyond my own pain. But now, I could see a future where things weren't perfect, but where we could create something new, a relationship built on mutual respect, understanding, and yes, forgiveness. The foundation I had built my life on had cracked, but it wasn't beyond repair. It wasn't perfect, but it was stronger than I had ever imagined. It wasn't just about fixing what had been broken. It was about creating something new. As I sit here now, reflecting on everything that's happened, I realize that the hardest part of all of this was not learning to forgive others. It was learning to forgive myself. To let go of the anger I had been holding on to for so long. To stop defining myself by my sacrifices and the mistakes of others. There's no quick fix when it comes to healing. No magic moment where everything is suddenly right again. But there is progress, there is growth, and there is always a chance to start over, to try again. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: forgiveness is not just for the other person, it's for you, too. It's about finding peace in the middle of chaos, about letting go of the hurt so that you can move forward. Because life doesn't stop, and neither should you. To anyone out there who's struggling to rebuild a relationship or to heal from pain, remember that you don't have to do it alone. Whether it's family, friends, or even yourself, the road to healing is a journey, not a destination, and it's worth every step. If you've been moved by David's journey of forgiveness and healing, make sure to hit that like button. Share this story with others who might need it, and subscribe for more updates. And leave a comment below. What did you take away from this story? How do you approach forgiveness in your own life? Let's talk about it.